Hello world and welcome to my Garden of Eden. My name is Liam, the Resilient Revolutionary, and this is the first video that I've been quite hesitant to record, but a lot of stuff has happened today and I feel as if there's no better timing. So, to get into it, ever since I was a little kid, I looked up to a lot of the YouTube greats, people like PewDiePie, Critical, Fudge Muppet, and I never had anything fancy. Growing up I had a little laptop, so I never had the ability to record nice gameplay and do nice things, talk, make a name for myself on YouTube. So I always kind of strived to make those steps. I was in 5th grade. I was designing computers to make. It's always been a passion of mine. But recently, I built myself a computer. I got myself an i9, some good RAM, and got myself a 3060 and a little mic. It's been a little while that I've had it. I've kind of been like, should I record? Should I not? I feel like it's now the good time. In the grand scheme of things, it's not all too relevant. It's just kind of basic background info. But what really is important about this video is the chance for me to tell my story of what I've had been through. It's a tragic, serene tale of abuse, neglect, love, and hatred. Most importantly, the thing that inspired the name of this channel is resilience. Knowing to not give up, knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that you can get through it. I tell my story not for sympathy, not for views, but for help. Not help for me, because I've gotten it, but I want to reach out to others. I want to create a safe haven for people, for friends, for people to relate, to find a common ground. The story does get a little rough, so buckle up and enjoy the lighthearted gameplay of Minecraft in the background. It may sound like a generic place to start, but when I was a wee little kid, I was decently bright. I was smart, I guess, but I always excelled in school, and I loved Broadway, and big fan of video games and books and movies. Just loved fantasy and drifting away in its creative, expansive outlets that really help you get away from it all. Whether it's a tough breakup or, for me, parents fighting down the hallway, whatever you go through, you can go to The Lord of the Rings, you can go to Skyrim, you can go to The Legend of Zelda, and you can be that hero that saves the world, and you don't have to worry about the existential climb that it would be to save your own world from whatever your impending doom is, your Alduin, your Ganon. That's just what always related to me. But, what do I know? I'm just a 17-year-old kid. But to go back to the roots of who I am, my story, I grew up, I had my mom in my life. She was my base advocate. Me and her shared a passion for Disney and the fantasy thing. She would read me Percy Jackson, she would read me The Hobbit whenever my parents would fight. And my grandma would take care of me when my mom was at work. They're some of the best people that I know to this day. But when I got older, things got rougher between me and my dad. He would stay out later. He'd fight with my mom more. And then eventually he'd just start threatening to leave. And he'd disappear for a couple days at a time, but he'd always come back. Except for one year when he decided he wouldn't come back. And it was super weird and vague. He was all dodgy and didn't want to admit it, didn't want to tell me why. He didn't seem to care too much how I felt when I tell him, hey, this is upsetting me. I'm not okay with that. I don't want to spend time with you. He would put me down. He'd call me names. I'd go to my mom crying, and he'd call me a baby chimp. He'd call me all these horrid things. But it would always be fine because he was the dad, and that's what he was traditionally supposed to do. So it came down to us going to court, custody, whatever, and we were assigned reunification therapy. And this therapy was toxic. It was him blatantly making fun of a small child, and the therapist being like, hey, you can't do that. I would word that differently. And he'd be like, no, I'm okay. I'm angry. I'm going to say what I want to say because I'm going to parent how I want to parent. It's like, dude, you've lost your mind. That's not cool. And it came down to one time I was in about the 5th grade, It was the first time I was ever supposed to see him outside of like therapy or whatever, and he's supposed to pick me up from school, and I'm at school. I'm having like a mental breakdown. I'm like, I can't see this guy. He doesn't talk to me about how he feels. He won't answer my questions. He bullies me, and he makes me feel like shit, and his entire family does the same. And I told my mom that because she worked at the school that I went to, and you know, like I said, my parents were young, so she doesn't fully know what to do. But she calls a therapist, and she's like, "Hey, this is happening. Liam doesn't want to go out." And my dad said that he would grab me and drag me across the parking lot whether I liked it or not. And the therapist said that if that's what he said, then he probably won't do it, but he's just angry, and then quit on us. We had to go back to court. We had to go to another therapist, and this therapist would go in circles. I'd be like, "Hey, Dad, I'm upset. I am hurt. You are putting me down. You are calling me names. You are not caring for what I have to tell you." And it was the same thing. He would say, yeah, but I don't care. And the therapist would be like, that's wrong, but Liam, we gotta move forward. You can't be upset all the time with your dad. And I'm like, yeah, that's why I don't want to be around this guy. But you're the ones forced me to do it. So eventually I kind of was just like, I mean, it was years of this. It was trauma. It was psychoactive, like, reproduction of your brain. It's rewiring you. It's abuse. It's things that the people nowadays don't recognize. And I say people nowadays like I'm some old boomer, but come on, guys. Like, let's open our eyes a little bit. And so I eventually had to start seeing him more often, on like a set schedule. I start going over there. He starts, the name calling starts turning into like just control. He would push me around. He'd yell at me. He'd say, do this, do that. But then he'd always do like the bare minimum and be like, oh, well, look what I did. Aren't I a cool guy? And little kid Liam, not even being like in the 7th grade at this point, was like, oh, yay, my dad loves me again. He likes me. Like, yay. I get to move forward with this dude. It's trauma. It's how some people cope with it. But I ended up spending more time with him. Eventually, he would put this, like, awful disdain towards my mom that he had. He would call her crazy for saying that he was an abuser. He would call her crazy for saying that the things he were doing was wrong. And I was young. I was naive. And I believed it. And I fell in. I went to my mom. I told her that I wanted to live full time with him. And she fought, and she always tried. She was like, it's not a good idea. And I was like, yeah, but there's no rules. I can do drugs, I can smoke weed, I can do whatever, I can hang out with my friends. And at the time, his mom still lived there. And I love that lady with my entire heart, rest her soul. And she would cook, she would, keep the house clean. She wasn't old enough to work. She had a bunch of issues, health-wise. I had a reason to stay over there. It wasn't like it was just terrible at this point. I moved in with my dad about March of 2020, and my dad had kicked her out December of 2020, and that's where things really started to go downhill. That's where my dad's drug abuse started picking up more. He was a very avid methamphetamine smoker. He would disappear for days at a time to God knows what. He would not buy groceries because he would spend his entire paycheck on meth, on guns. I'd tell him that I was depressed, that I was suicidal, that I couldn't stand it anymore, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And he would just essentially gaslight me. He'd tell me that I'm fine, and he never got me any help. He never got me any treatment. I picked up a very severe usage of marijuana. I picked up a very severe usage of LSD. I did anything I could do to escape. Back to the fantasy thing. There was times I literally would just take enough acid to kill a horse and sit in my room and play Skyrim on a projector, surrounded in dog shit and filth, mold, and God knows what. Guns, meth, bullets, explosives. No child should live like that. And eventually, I got a cat. I love that cat. Her name is Luthien Tenuviel. It's beautiful nightingale in Quenya. It's from Tolkien's The Silmarillion, and she saved my life. There was one day on my 17th birthday where everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. I wanted to have a cool rager in the woods with all my friends and get drunk and get high. But I would get high every day with the same people, and my family sucked, and it was my family's woods. So we all get out there, and my dad's too high to notice what I'm doing. My grandfather is a narcissistic asshole who is making this giant bonfire, and it's like, yo, Liam, why didn't you come mow the field for your birthday? And I'm like, 'cause it's my birthday, I didn't know I was supposed to. My grandmother gets pissed at me, and she's like, why didn't you ask for food? And I'm like, 'cause I was abused before for asking for food from my dad, and you knew that, so I'm not really good at asking for that kind of shit. She never said happy birthday to me. She flicked me off and kind of just drove away. I ended up going back in the woods. We took a couple dabs, we smoked a little bit, or we drank a little bit, and I passed out at like 10:30. Woke up the next day. We went to my old work that fired me for missing one day. I don't know why we did that. Then I ended up taking LSD, and I ended up by the James River in Richmond. And I get down to like this old abandoned building, and I'm in the middle of it, and I'm like my friend, I'm like, yo, why the fuck am I here? Like, what is wrong with my life? He's like, I don't know, I think you want to smoke weed. I'm like, no, I didn't. I don't want to be here. And he's like, what do you mean you don't want to be here? I'm like, I don't want to be where I am in life. I want to be dead. I don't know what else to do. And I was with some other friends, and they all start like freaking out, like, holy shit, what's wrong with Liam? What do we do? And I'm like, I don't know. I took acid and I regret everything. God, I was a fucking stupid kid, I guess. But thank God I made it out alive. I didn't want to go home that night because I was just afraid, not of like my dad, or not afraid of this or that. I was afraid of being alone in that house. I thought I'd be dead. And so my friends like drove me around for hours until they finally decided to take me home because I was just being fucking obnoxious to them at that point. I mean, I understand it. And I get home and my dad's not even there. So I'm like, damn, I'm alone. And I get into bed. I have my cat in my hands. And at this point, I'm like breathing heavy as fuck. I'm like, like sweating and shaking. I have like no clothes on except for some boxers. I'm curled up in a ball on my bed with my cat, and she's what kept me alive that night. She's what kept me sane, and I got some sleep. I woke up the next morning, and I had talked to my dad about everything. I was like, hey, this is how I feel. I feel abandoned. I feel like I've lost everything in my life. I feel like I've fucked up. I feel like I have nothing else to do other than die. And he minimized it. He said it was just the drugs talking. He said that it was a normal thing that happens when you do drugs. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's just being an asshole, not normal behavior. So he's like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So a couple days go by of me just trying to talk to whoever I can to get some sort of validation that I need help and that I'm right on the fact that I need help. And nobody knew what I was talking about because of the people I would surround myself with, who were a bunch of drug addict kids who were all depressed. Like, this is common behavior. I live in the suburbs of Richmond, dude. And like 3 or 4 days later, I talked to my ex-girlfriend, who was my ex-girlfriend at the time too. Like, she still is, but I was like, I need help. And she's like, yeah, you need help. So I ended up putting my foot down. I looked at my dad. I was like, I need to go to an inpatient facility. I need to get help. I don't know where to go, but you need to take me. And he's like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, that means a lot of time. And I was like, I don't care. I need help, and you haven't helped me for years, and nobody knows how to help me. He drove all around town like a wild goose chase, taking me to everywhere except for the hospital. Eventually, somebody told us that we needed to go to the ER. And I'm like, take me to the ER. And he's like, nah, we gotta go home first. So he goes to his house, and I feed my cat. I pet her, and I say, I will see you soon, girl. I love you. And he locked himself in the bathroom. No, he locked himself in his room, and he started smoking some meth. And I was like, holy shit, dude, really? And I kicked his door down, and I said, get the fuck in the car. We're going to the ER. And he's like stumbling over. He's like, okay. And we go to the ER, and I don't know what's wrong. So I literally check, and I say, I've lost my mind. I need mental health help. So I was in the hospital for like 12, 13 hours with I was just him sitting next to me, snoring obnoxiously loud. I'm sitting there watching South Park, contemplating my life, relating every mistake I've ever made to Eric Cartman being a dumbass. It's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and my dad's snoring his lungs off, and I just smack him a couple times. I'm like, just shut up or leave. And like, this is the same guy that an hour earlier during a mental health exam, when I told them I was suicidal, he told them I wasn't. This guy knew that I've been suicidal for 5 years. There was a time I literally went up to him. I asked for dinner. I hadn't eaten for days. And he's like, I don't have money. And I'm like, you just got paid. Why don't you have money? And he goes, I don't want to talk about it. And that was the time I was like, I know you smoke meth. Stop wasting your fucking money. And he's like, I don't want to talk about it. And I said, well, I do. You don't know what I ever do. I could be dead in my room and you wouldn't know. I'm hungry. And he got up from the couch and he's like, don't say that. And I'm like, it's the truth. And then he pushed me to the ground. And that time he went in the bathroom and he lit up his bowl. I was like, holy shit. And it just seemed normal to me. It just seemed like something that I had to deal with, because everybody deals with shit. Why is mine any worse or any better than anybody else's? But at least I can recognize it, I guess. And I went to the hospital. That's what helped me recognize a little bit more. I got in touch with my mom again. Me and her, we caught up a lot. I tried to talk to my dad about like what to do moving forward, and he pretty much said that he didn't want to help himself and that it was all about me. And I was like, damn. Alright, because that was the moment I knew in my head that I was done with him. I wanted nothing to do with him anymore, and the only thing that he did for me was keep my cat alive, so thanks for that, I guess. But I get out of the hospital, I go, and I grab all my stuff, and I immediately pack up and I go to Disney with my mom, and it was like a sporadic, let's just go, on a Thursday, and we got home Sunday, so it was like a couple days, caught up, and we talked, and that's when I decided, I was like, yeah, I need to go to court for this. He needs repercussion of some sort. So I start talking to whoever I can, you know. We open another CPS case because CPS had already been there once. We open up a police investigation. I start telling my story to them, and they don't take it serious at first. I'm like, no, dude, this is serious. And eventually they get a home warrant, and they bust down his door, and they seized a bunch of guns and bullets, drugs. They arrested him. And then I filed a neglect charge. The hearing was today. He pled guilty on a misdemeanor count of child neglect and abuse. He is currently in a rehab in Massachusetts, and God knows what he's thinking. He's, I guess, sober. He's all swollen and he's pretty bad. But that's my story. But a story that is more important to me is the story of my friend Chris. I'm gonna not disclose the last name for privacy reasons, but he was a family friend, I guess you could say, of me and my dad. He was about 25 years old, and my dad met him a couple of years ago, and he got him hooked on meth when he met him. But Chris was a great guy. He was in the reserves for the military, and he'd bring MREs home for me. He'd let me eat. He'd like hang out with me when my dad wasn't there, and we'd just play Battlefield. We'd just talk, we'd hang out or whatever. And when I was on the way to the hospital, my dad looked at me and he's like, you know, I think you should talk to Chris. Chris might know how to help you. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to him when I get out. That's because it was like the first person that he had mentioned that I was like, yeah, that's who I want to talk to. Come to find out that the day after I checked into the hospital, Chris had gone to my dad about his own mental health issues. And 30 minutes after leaving his house, he committed suicide. So that's the biggest reason for charges, the actual legal matter of it all, other than preventing people from gaslighting me in the future, preventing whatever it may be. It's justice for Chris. It's proof of this bullshit Roe v. Wade stuff. Like, you could have an abortion, and what happened to me happened to me. I'm 17. Think about the kids that are with parents that don't want them in the future. Think about the kids that are in abusive homes and they get pregnant and they don't know what else to do, so they put a clothes hanger up there and then they bleed out. Think about the fathers who find out that they're gonna be a father and they leave. Think about the mothers who find out they're gonna be a mother, and instead of killing the baby, they just kill themselves. Like, this world is ugly. This world is harmful, but this world is also beautiful, and this world is also united. And if we work together, and if we aren't just ignorant assholes to everybody, we can not only change our world, we can change the world for our future, we can change the world for our children, we can actually make this world a better place. That's just a little bit about me, and I know, like I said, this is a little bit touchier of a video. Most of my other ones won't be this deep, but I do look forward to going somewhere with this. I love you all. Like and subscribe if you would like. Leave a comment. I don't care if you hate me, if you love me, or if you don't even speak English. Just leave a comment, say something. I like people, so take it easy and have a wonderful day, night, evening, whatever it is. Goodbye.